Hey y'all, I'm JD and welcome back to the Dimensionswoodworks woodshop. Today we're going to be working on a farmhouse style bookshelf. Let's get started. So for this project I decided to go with some rough cut cypress I had in my lumber racks. I think using the rough cut lumber will help to give us that real authentic rustic feel that we're looking for in the project. I began the basic milling process by skip planing the boards because they're a little too wide to fit on my joiner, so we can just clean them up and see what we have to work with. Although running the boards through the planer won't give you a perfectly flat face, it will give you a face to work with. So I take the boards to the joiner and get one flat edge and then cut the other edge square at the table saw. I'm not overly concerned with having a flat reference face because most of the boards will be glued into panels and I will flatten the panel as a whole after the glue is cured. A lot of folks opt for biscuits, dowels, or even dominoes for this process, but I just glue up long grain to long grain, and the glue joint is more than strong enough to sustain over time. I began cleaning up the glue squeeze out and the flattening of the panel over at the workbench with some hand planes, just to get a relatively nice flat face to work with. Then I continue on with the handheld belt sander and follow that up with my random orbital sander to get a nice flat face. And off camera I take the oversized panel back to the joiner, get a true edge, and then cut the panels all to their final length and width over at the table saw. This knot makes a really cool feature in this panel, but I want to stabilize it, so a little bit of epoxy down in that void and we'll be good to go. While I'm giving my epoxy some time to cure, I go back over to the table saw and begin to cut out the rest of the components that will make up the legs, the frame, and the X braces on either side of this farmhouse bookshelf. I used my handy Craig Multimark and a combination square to lay out the space that my legs will be seated into the panels. I marked that area for waste, and then we will cut it out really quickly with a Japanese pull saw. I didn't want to go with any overly complicated joinery methods on this build, so some simple pocket holes through the panel that will attach the legs along with some glue will make for a really strong connection and have a nice stable bookshelf. Then I'll just use the screws to join everything together and dry fit the piece. I want to make sure I have a good fit on everything before I come back, disassemble, add glue to the joints, and then put the screws back in. And after getting a little silly in the shop by myself, it's time to fit the cross braces and lay out the marks for the angles on the ends of those, as well as the angles for the half laps to join them together. I've found that this is the most accurate way to get a true angle. I lay them out and mark them on the piece, and then I measure it with an angle finding gauge and set my saw to that angle in order to make the cut. I follow the same process with the half laps, except for this time I'm going to cut a dado in both pieces to create this half lap joint. but I am going to set my miter gauge on the table saw to make those cuts. And as with most of my traditional joinery methods, I use my power tools to get close to the line, then really dial the fit in with chisels and hand tools, and finally a little bit of sandpaper to make sure to get a good tight fit on that half lap. And because I wanted to have adjustable shelves in this bookcase, I went ahead and made myself a quick and dirty shelf pinning jig because I did not have a commercial one at the time. It's a pretty straightforward process, but you just want to make sure you're as accurate as possible when drilling these guide holes. Then at the top and bottom of my shelf pinning jig, I used a Forstner bit to create a recess a little bit larger than the head of these Craig Automax clamps to allow me to move quickly and adjust the shelf pinning jig up and down. Once I was happy with the starting point and the top set of holes were drilled, I could use a small dowel for an indexing pin and move the top hole of the jig down to the bottom hole that I just drilled and continue that pattern as far as you need it. Now that everything is in place and the dry fit looks good, I can remove the X braces to give me some clearance to drill the holes that will secure the top to the bookshelf. I want to make sure my spacing is good all the way around, seat it in place, and then screw it down. After we're happy with the fit of everything, we can disassemble the piece to add glue in the necessary locations. Also, I decided to add a little decorative OG around just the top shelf of the bookshelf. Now before we add finish to the piece, I mark out where all the bare parts intersect so that I can leave them bare and get a better glue adhesion on the finished piece. I also mark the shelves and their location in the build. Masking off these areas that I want to leave bare really helps out to make sure I don't get any paint or stain in those spaces. It's not absolutely necessary, but it helps out a lot, and it's easy just to pull the paint away once the finish is dry. We're going for the classic farmhouse finish on this piece, so I begin with a really dark wood stain, and then once that stain is dried, we're going to apply a white chalk paint on top and then sand back through so that some of that dark color shows through, along with some spaces where we go all the way back to bare wood. Now that all the finish is dry, we can remove that masking tape and apply glue in the joints where needed. I begin the reassembly process with gluing and screwing the main frame together first, which includes the bottom shelf, and then add glue to the half lap joints and place those X braces in, tacking them in with a few brad nails, and let the glue dry. Once the glue has had time to cure, we can go back with the sander and the hand sandpaper and begin that distressed look just by lightly sanding over the entirety of the piece and then really focusing on the areas mostly around the edges, but then just pick some random spots throughout the build, and this really looks pretty cool when you're all done. When you're using this technique, less is more. It's always best to go a little less than you think and then go back and touch up certain spots than to go too far initially, and it makes it much harder to fix later down the line. Now I used a small piece of faux beadboard to create a back. I put a bead of glue around it and then tack it into place with brad nails while the glue dries. This really helps to stabilize the piece and prevent racking long term. Thanks so much for watching, y'all. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified when we release new videos. That really goes a long way to help out the channel. And until next time, don't forget to get better every day.